Hello again, friends, and welcome to another episode of Doc G's Wine and Spirits Review. So, as you look at the surroundings here, you might be wondering, I wonder where he is this time. So let me begin with a little introduction and a welcome to my new area that we are dubbing the Auto Art Cellar. Little side story, my wife has been wanting to take up some watercoloring and pencil artwork, and I have always enjoyed being down here taking care of my wine. So we went ahead and we did a little renovation down here, and what you see behind me is the result of that effort. So welcome to the Auto Art Cellar for today's segment. So what you see here on the table is going to be a little bit of a departure from just doing a specific wine review. Today's segment is going to focus on I'm going to call it the art, we'll call it a process. The process of decanting wine. And decanting simply means taking the bottle and emptying it, usually a red wine, into another container, usually something very similar to these glass vessels that you see here on the table. So before we do that, I'm going to pour, and I'm doing this for a specific reason. This is what I always do when I open a bottle of especially red. Take it, make sure it's not skunked. That one has a very, very nice nose. And then what I do with it is I decant it, and I'm going to do that for you in just a second. But before I do that, I need to take a sip and say, welcome to March 1st. It is the first meteorological day of spring. COVID seems to be on the run, and I'm just pumped about the ability to start getting outside more and hope that this COVID thing is going to be behind us real soon. So with that, welcome, and let's begin today's topic, decanting. So what I'll do next for you is I'm going to take this bottle, and I'll tell you the wine. It is a Josh Cabernet Sauvignon, which I happen to have in my collection. And I'm going to put it in one of these decanters. This is what I generally do with a red wine. We'll take it, and we'll use this little thing here. It is actually another way to aerate a wine. It has a little sieve in it, which helps to take out any sediment that might still be in the wine. Usually in a wine this young, you won't get a lot of that sediment, but we just pour it in there, and you can see the wine flowing in. And as the wine's flowing in, it's mixing it with some air, which is basically what decanting is in a nutshell. So this is one decanter that I've chosen, and I'll tell you why I did. So now your bottle is empty. Don't get rid of it. You may not drink all your wine. It does happen sometimes. So that's Josh Seller's 2016 Cabernet Sauvignon. Take this out. Set it by the side, not going to do any harm. And the reason that I've done that is I want to, by the end of this presentation, which usually runs 15, 20, maybe half an hour, is to compare what happened in the wine in the decanter versus what happened to it in the glass. Right now, you could probably drink this out of the bottle if you want to. I know a lot of people, you don't have the convenience of being able to decant a wine, so you may just drink it straight out of the bottle. I am going to tell you that this wine will improve no matter whether it needed decanting or not, from the time I poured it in this glass to the time I put it in here to the time I re-pour it at the end to give you a comparison. So right now it's nice, jammy, currants, raisins, what you'd expect from a typical Cabernet Sauvignon. But the recommendation for decanting wines, and especially red, you can decant white, it's generally not done. You can decant orange wines, which are wines that are left on their skins a little bit longer, even white grapes. And you can decant, even they say champagne. I've never seen that done, and I have personally never done it. Bottle of champagne doesn't last that long when we have it open to begin with. So those are the things that you can decant. But the whole purpose of decanting is to release some of the acids and some of the tannins in the wine to make it smoother. I can tell you that there are some wines that I've opened and they just were not ready to be consumed at the time they were opened. They're just a little too much tannin, too much pull, too much tart. Air will generally do that. It's just the process of oxidization. And the wine oxidizes when it hits oxygen. So the decanter that you use would have an effect on the type of oxidation that takes place in the wine. So let's talk about this topic a little bit further, because I have a true confession for you. I have a real hard time not going into, and I don't go alone, but I go into Home Goods with my wife and they have a row of decanters. I'm always looking for a new decanter. So I also have a problem, if some of you are familiar with a store called Crate and Barrel. It gives me the shakes when I get in there. I love decanters. So let's talk about them while this wine starts to decant for us. This one, as you can see, has a very large surface area. There's nothing wrong with it if you pour it in there and swirling it around. But if you compare, if you just take the bottle of wine and try to decant it from the little hole in the neck of the bottle, it's really not going to come into contact with the air. So the wine needs to be in contact with as much air as possible. A jug, a vessel like this decanter allows that to happen. So there are a couple factors that you want to look at when you're dealing with the type of decanter that you want to get. So first of all, some of these decanters, if you're going to get high-end decanters, can run you a couple $100s. I can tell you nothing I have here on the table cost me a couple $100, because I have bought too many decanters along the way. I've broken a few. So, and it's not as hard to break them as you think, because they need to be taken care of and washed, and they get moved around, and as heavy, and you can hear it, as heavy as they are, they will break and they'll chip here around the neck, and then the next thing you know, it's cracked and you got to get rid of it. So you can, you can spend what you want on a decanter. I'll just leave it at that. If you go to Home Goods, I've found good ones for $7.99. I think this one here I'm going to talk about in a minute was one that I found in one of those bargain stores for like $10. So we'll go down the row here and I'll show you what each one of these decanters has to offer. So let's take a look at this one first, since I poured the wine in it. This one is known as kind of just a traditional decanter. You'll see these in different variations, different volume levels, how much wine you can put in. If you have 2 bottles of wine and your decanter is big enough to hold it, and I have a larger one here that I'll show you in a minute, feel free to do it if you know everybody's going to drink the wine, because once you decant the wine, it's going to begin to lose its power. And when I mean power, the fruit flavors are going to go, it'll still stay, with the same alcohol level. The alcohol's not going to go away, but the fruits and the tannins and all of that, they just begin to die. And it'll mutate the wine into something that's not really good. It's on its way to becoming vinegar if you do that. So you don't want to do that. So that's the first one. Very traditional decanter, has kind of a little round bottom, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then you have others like this one. And this one I want to talk about specifically. It has something in the bottom of it called a punt. And that punt, you'll see it on the bottom of wine bottles, is just they push the glass up in there and it allows the wine to circulate around that punt, which increases the oxygenation of the wine, helping it to decant just a little bit faster. Very handy, nice sloped neck. You just pour right out of it. One of the problems you do have with decanters is you can buy these little towels that you wrap around them so that when the wine drips down here, you can do that. What I just generally do is just wipe it off quickly with my hand, or have a towel handy when I'm pouring it, because the wine will run down there when you're pouring it. So if you're using a decanter around really nice linens and tablecloths, you want to take care of that, because you're going to have red wine drips. It will happen with them, but believe me, it's worth it to decant it. And then another type of decanter, this falls into what's kind of known as the duck style decanter, because it's got kind of the shape of a duck bending over. And this one happens to have a handle, some do not. But again, this has a little flat spot here. You pour your wine in here, you're going to get maximum surface exposure for your wine. You just pour from here. And there's another form of a decanter. a lot of these are made in Hungary and Poland, and they're just not very expensive. And then there's another one here. You can see that the handle is blown right into it. The wine flows down around this circle. This one doesn't give you the maximum oxygenation, but it gives you enough that if you want to use it, and it is really very sturdy and very handy, makes it very convenient for pouring your wine. So let's give this another swirl, and we'll see how that wine has changed by the end of this presentation. So the next decanter that I wanted to show is this one. This one is called a Swan style decanter, and you can see why. This one was a little more expensive. I got this one as a gift. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't remember whether it was a Christmas gift, a birthday gift, or whatever it was. And I'm going to tell you, this one is real fun to look at. Looks real nice with the red wine in the bottle. But one of the factors that I didn't talk about yet, and there's some things that you want to, you're looking at these and going, well, Doc, gee, do I want a decanter? Do I really need one? No, you don't need one. But I wouldn't be doing this spot for you if I didn't recommend one. At least one. If you're going to, you don't have to have the problem and the fetish with glass that I do. But it would be nice to have a decanter on hand, especially if you enjoy really good red wine, because good red wine will always benefit. It'll never hurt a red wine to decant it. You don't have to, but it will never, ever hurt a red wine. So what are some other factors that you want to look at when you are talking about whether or not you really want to have, along with your wine collection or with whatever wines you have, a decanter available? There are really two that I want to talk about beyond price. I already talked about price. You can go from, I'm telling you, I bought decanters for $7. Probably broken and gone, and I probably spent, I think the most expensive one I bought was $50. I think that's broken too. So the other two things that you want to look at are cleanup and storage, because as you can see here, these are not all of the decanters that I have. I do have a few more, not many, but about 4 or 5 more. And you have to find a place for them. They take up a lot of shelf space. They take up a lot of cabinet space. So if you don't have a ton of space, don't buy them. Buy one and have it. Buy one that's a little bit more sleek, like this one. It doesn't, you notice it doesn't take up the floor space. These, where are you going to put this? You got to have a place for it. They can be decorative to some degree. I have one back here that I bought. Where are you going to put this thing? I can tell you where we keep it. We keep it right here. It's a decorative device now. It's part of our new decor in the Auto Art Center. That probably holds 4 or 5 bottles of wine. I've used it once. So those are some important tips. The last tip is you got to clean these things. And there are a number of ways to clean them. I have a chemical compound that I use. It's the same chemical compound. They get too much of the red on them because the glass will actually etch and it'll get dyed red if you don't clean them properly. But I have a substance that you use to clean an espresso coffee maker. It's called Cafezza. If you want to Google it, a little jug of bisodium something or other, that will help. And it actually does work. The fun part of these is really not getting them clean. You can spray a little Dawn or drop a little soap in there. You really don't need much because they get soapy. Put some really hot water and just a tad, a little bit of soap will get your decanter clean. The problem is getting in here to dry it out, because even though it does help your wine oxygenate, it's not the most friendly environment to get in there to try to clean it, to dry it out. So the only ones that are real easy to dry out are these that don't have a lot of curves, but you have to get, the neck always narrows, and believe me, I have a device that I stand them upside down on. It's just a metal bar with a rubber ball at the top of it so they don't break, and the water drips out and you have to keep constantly polishing them. So they're a lot of work, but I can tell you they are fun to have. Just as an example, I had a dinner party about a week or so ago with some friends, and I had 6 bottles of wine that I wanted to serve, 3 different ones, 2 bottles. I decanted them before they got here. I poured them in each of these decanters, and then I put them back in the bottle so that they were already decanted. And I can tell you, some of the wines that I served really needed a lot of air, and it helped do that. I actually decanted them for about 2 hours. And that is actually a fourth factor that I should talk about when you're decanting wine. You need to know, and there are guidelines on, if you look in wine books, but a general guideline is no less than a half an hour. This isn't even going to get to that because I'm not going to be on with you a half an hour. Some wines will change in 15, 20 minutes, and I'm hoping that's what happens with this Cabernet Sauvignon that I had here. But, so you're going to have to, find a decanter that works for you based on all of those factors that I just discussed. So there's really not much more to talk about with decanters. I would say to you that if you really don't want to get a decanter, quite frankly, a nice big glass gives you, if you think about it, the surface area that you want in order to put it in the glass a half an hour before you're going to drink it. It won't hurt it. I've done that. I don't always want to break out one of my decanters for the reasons that I just talked about. Cleaning them, polishing them up, going back and put them away. But I do love having them on a weekly basis. I will break my decanters out for dinner. I'll know what the dinner schedule is, more or less. Get the wine out, let it sit, they call it let it breathe. That's really what decanting is. And then you're done. So let me take this last sip before we get to the close here. That's already changed. It's not as, there's a little bit more grip in the beginning. I'm going to move this one. This is my precious one. And I want to bring into the picture one that you can also use. If you remember, we just did a spot on brandy a little while ago. That's some brandy. Look at the beautiful color. Now, the nice thing about brandy is you couldn't do this with the wine. This brandy's been sitting in here a couple days, and it could sit in here all the rest of the winter, what's left of it, although we're running out of time. Remember, it's meteorological spring. So that's a brandy decanter, brandy snifter they used to call it, brandy decanter. So I have one of these too. I wouldn't put wine in here. It's not made for wine. It's real heavy, and you can see you don't have to shake it. You don't have to do anything to it. You have a nice glass of brandy right straight from here, and you can get rid of the bottle. So with that said, let's close out our experiment today. Let's take this wine, swish it around. You can see some of the air actually coming up off of it. Beautiful color. But the other thing with the decanter allows you to do, it allows you to actually admire the color of the wine. If you're really into wine, looking at the color of the wine can be an enjoyable experience. Because when you talk about wine, you talk about the site, you talk about the flavors, you talk about the history and everything that goes with it. It's a complete sensual experience in the true sense of the word. So let's pour another shot in here. Gotta love that scent. See, there's a little drip there. Take care of that. Now, let's see what has happened. And I'll be totally honest with you. Actually, in this, we're at close to 20 minutes here on the air with you. This has already started to have the fruit emerge. It's actually getting better as it aerates. The tannins have already smoothed down. This probably needs another half hour to 45 minutes, but it's already beginning to change. And you can do what I just did in my mouth. Remember, I taught you, I don't recommend you do that at parties, but that's another way to get the wine to open up a little bit if you want to get a quick idea of what it's going to be like after you oxygenate it in your mouth, on your tongue, and by sucking in some air through your lips. So that's decanting 101. My advice to you is if you don't own a decanter, give some thought to getting one. You won't be sorry. Don't spend any more than you have to. If you have a wine friend, somebody who really likes wine, hint, hint. No, I'm just kidding. But if you have a friend who really is into wine and especially really likes red wine and you need to get them their next gift, go buy them a decanter. You can get them at Bed Bath & Beyond. You can go to Crate and Barrel. You can go to Walmart. Everybody sells decanters. You can just get a water jug and call it a wine decanter. That's the whole point. The whole point of decanting is to get the wine exposed to the air. But in all seriousness, if you want to buy somebody a nice gift who is a wine aficionado, amateur, somebody who's just getting into wine, or for yourself, buy yourself a wine decanter. I don't have any stock in wine decanters. I can tell you though that I do have stock in hoping that you enjoy your next glass of red wine better than you would have if you didn't have decanter. So go out and get yourself a decanter. And I can't leave without saying, go try a bottle of this Josh Cabernet Sauvignon, sold here right in Pennsylvania, North Coast Reserve by Josh Sellers. This happens to be a 2016, so it's 6 years in the bottle. It's time for it to escape. So, until the next time, you're going to be seeing a lot more features from this location. I'd like to say happy spring. Say a prayer for the people in Ukraine. You stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.